All right, so the next part of hypertension has to do with how does an increase in sodium and reduction in potassium in the blood of the kidneys cause hypertension? Well, now we're going to focus our attention at the arterial wall. So this is a picture of the arterioles. You have the lumen of the arterioles, and then you have the smooth muscle cells of the vascular smooth muscle cells of the arterial wall. And the idea is how does all that sodium that's been reabsorbed in the kidneys, what effect does it have on the arterioles of the blood or of the body to cause vascular contraction, which is going to lead to an increase in blood pressure. So all of this, what we're going to talk about in just a little bit, has to do with increasing the amount of calcium in the vascular smooth muscle cell, because that's going to cause an increase in actin and myosin interaction, leading to vascular contraction and a more narrow space for blood to flow through, leading to an increase in blood pressure. So the link is, how does sodium that's been reabsorbed in the kidney, made its way to the arterioles, cause an increase in calcium in the vascular smooth muscle cell of the arterioles? Well, it starts here with an excess of sodium in the body is going to cause a release of digitalis-like factor from the brain and from the brain, and that's going to cause the stopping of the sodium pump on the cell membrane of the vascular smooth muscle. What this is going to do is it's going to cause an increased amount of sodium inside the vascular smooth muscle cell. Well, this sodium is going to leave the vascular smooth muscle cell through the sodium-calcium exchanger 1. As 3 sodium leaves, a calcium ion moves into the vascular smooth muscle cell. Likewise, when you have a deficit of potassium in the body, along with an increased sodium in the body, again, that's going to contribute to the stoppage of the sodium pump, which is going to prevent potassium from entering, which is going to reduce new potassiums from entering into the vascular smooth muscle cell. Well, this is going to close off the potassium channel. Normally, potassium leaves through this potassium channel, but it closes due to the stopping of the sodium pump. This is going to trap any remaining potassium inside the vascular smooth muscle cell. Well, when you trap this potassium inside the vascular smooth muscle cell, because of the prolonged closing of this potassium channel, that's going to cause hyperpolarization of the vascular smooth muscle cell. So in other words, the vascular smooth muscle cell is going to depolarize, which means it's going to become less negative. And also contributing to this depolarization is the stopping of the sodium pump itself. That's going to contribute to, through some electrical charges, that's going to cause depolarization as well. Well, now that you have depolarization of the vascular smooth muscle cell, that's going to have an effect on increasing calcium inside the vascular smooth muscle cell. The first of which is it's going to activate these voltage-gated calcium channel, and calcium is going to move from the intracellular fluid and move its way into the vascular smooth muscle cell. At the same time, you have these ryanodine receptor calcium channels that are on the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And the sarcoplasmic reticulum is a storage organelle for calcium, and it basically soaks up and stores any calcium inside the vascular smooth muscle cell and keeps it out of the rest of the cell itself. Well, depolarization is going to cause the ryanodine receptor calcium channels to open, and calcium is going to move out of the sarcoplasmic reticulum and into the rest of the vascular smooth muscle cell. Likewise, the depolarization is going to upregulate the sodium-calcium exchanger 1, allowing more calcium to enter through the intracellular fluid, from the intracellular fluid. So now that you have an increased amount of calcium inside the vascular smooth muscle cell, that's going to cause an increased amount of actin and myosin interaction. If you think back to your anatomy and physiology, actin and myosin is going to interact via calcium, due to calcium. And here again is actin, the small blue, myosin is the red, and the idea is that calcium is going to cause them to come together, okay? And when they come together, that's going to cause the vascular contraction. So the opening of the arteriole is now going to contract and it's going to narrow. And when it narrows, what's happening now is you have less space, lumen space, for the blood to flow through. And with less space for the blood to flow through, you have an increase in blood pressure. Imagine if you're ever watering using a hose and you put your thumb over the end of the hose and all of a sudden the pressure picks up and the water shoots out farther. Well, the same thing is you've narrowed the space at the end of that hose, so the pressure to get that water through that more narrow space increases. Well, the same thing is happening now in your arterioles. The arterioles have contracted, less space for the blood to go through, lumen space for the blood to go through, and your blood pressure rises. So all of these steps from the kidneys to now the arterioles with the reabsorption of sodium contributed to the increased amount of calcium in the vascular smooth muscle cell that causes actin and myosin to interact, causing vascular contraction, a more narrow lumen for the blood to flow through. You have an increase in blood pressure. So make sure that you have a good understanding. Write these steps in your own words before you check. You'll see that the steps are located right after in your notes here, right after this pathway. So go through, make sure you understand this pathway, and that the long-term effects of this is primary hypertension. Do the practice also on Blackboard, ordering these steps in the correct order. Once you have a good understanding of the pathway, you should move on and do the thinking review questions. These are the same questions as at the kidney, but now you're going to connect what's happening in the kidney to what's happening here in the arterioles, leading to an increase in or decrease in blood pressure. So before, I'll post the handout or the slide, a video on the reviewing these questions. Make sure though that you do these ahead of time and then check your answers.